Hello everyone, and good morning everyone. I thought I'd do this game yesterday right after it was finished, but I was really tired and decided I'd do it straight in the morning. And it's a good thing I did, since I have a lot of nice photos from the candidates and from this game to share with you guys. I have the photos. I contacted Nikki Riga. She's a photographer, and she will be at the candidates every day. So for this video and every other video I will do about the candidates, we will be able to enjoy some nice photos. So this is Nikki, that's her on the right with Magnus Carlsen, and if you enjoy chess, if you enjoy photos, if you enjoy chess photography, feel free to follow her. I will put all of the links to her social media in the description below, so you can enjoy some more chess photos in the future. So let's see this game. It's Vladimir Kramnik with the white pieces against Fabiano Caruana. Here we have them. This is right before the game. The first move is being made. The e4 pawn lounges forward, and here we have Fabiano Caruana considering what to do in the opening. So as I will use a couple of more photos as they're really enjoyable, let's first see the game. So Kramnik is definitely feeling alright with himself. In round 3 he defeated Levon Aronian with that Berlin specialty, and now he has the white pieces against Fabiano Caruana. The world really doesn't get any better than that. So he opens with e4. Fabiano replies e5, we have knight to f3 and knight to f6. Fabiano goes for the Petrov defense. Knight captures on e5, d6, knight back to f3, and knight captures on e4 now. And I will just mention here, as if you ever face the Petrov, you should know this famous trap. If white replies knight c3 and black tries to defend this knight with bishop to f5, this loses the game immediately for black, because queen e2 wins the piece. It seems like a trivial mistake and a trivial trap, but a lot of great players fell for this opening, even the great Vishwanathan Anand. Because now if you try to defend the knight, of course d3 is a threat if knight is defended in any way by the pawn, and if queen to e7, then knight to d5 simply wins the game. You have to move the queen to still defend the c7 pawn, so queen to d8, and now d3 again wins the piece. Just wanted to throw that in there, but okay, after knight to e4, queen e2 now by Kramnik, we have queen to e7, and now knight to c3. Knight captures, d captures, and queen captures on e2. Bishop captures on e2, and this is move 8 of the game. Already the queens are off the board, a pair of knights is off the board, and I caught a glimpse of live coverage on Chess24 by Gustafsson and Svidler. They were very unimpressed of how Kramnik was treating this opening after that yesterday's brilliancy against Aronian. He decided to play the Petrov, which really doesn't give white any edge, and now you know, you have to play this position. You're not worse or anything, but you definitely don't have any advantage. Maybe a little one in development, but nothing to be very proud of. But okay, knight to c6, we have bishop to e3, bishop to e7, and here Kramnik castles queenside. And here I have a nice photo of this moment. Here you have, after Kramnik made his castle, he is pouring himself a cup of coffee, and he's ready to really play this game regardless of how long it takes. This is him. After he had his sip of coffee, now you can see he's ready to do some battle. So here Caruana castles, and rook h to e1. So simply developing all of the pieces. Bishop to f6. We have knight to d2, transferring the knight, rook to e8, and bishop to f3. Knight to e5, attacking the bishop on f3, bishop to f4 now, king to f8, as the rook on e8 is undefended, bishop to d5, we have c6, bishop to b3, and bishop to f5 now. h3, g5, attacking the bishop, bishop to h2, and king to g7. And here we have c4 by Kramnik, and a very interesting decision. And so far, you know, it's a game. Nothing is really happening. Everyone is trying to win this square, win that square, win some more space. And here Caruana goes for g4. An interesting move definitely would be something like c5. Maybe push the c5 early and try to make this light square bishop look silly. But then knight to e4 simply will force white to give up his bishop as the d6 pawn is hanging, and if you try and defend this with, let's say, bishop to e7, then white can simply capture the c5 pawn, as now the knight will be undefended after the pawn captures. In here, g4 by Caruana. Again, knight to e4 with a double attack on the d6 pawn. Bishop captures, rook captures, and bishop to g5 now with check. King to b1 and g captures on h3. And this is where the game starts to get interesting. Here, the obvious response is g captures on h3, and then f5 will follow, and so on. But in the game, Kramnik decided to go c5. He's allowing Fabiano to create a nice pass pawn already on g2, but he will capture the pawn on d6 and create a nice pass pawn of his own. So here, first f5, as you know, why not grab a tempo first. Rook to b5 attacking the b7 pawn, and now h captures on g2. So rook captures on b7, this is with check, king to h8, and now c captures on d6. So now you have this really far away past g pawn, and you have this well, already on c6 past c pawn on d6 by Kramnik. So we have knight to f3 attacking the bishop on h2, and here we have really the move of the game. But there will be a lot of great moments in the game. Here, Kramnik plays the bishop to a4, and this is in fact the strongest move. He sacrifices the bishop on h2 for the following idea. Caruana isn't very impressed by his move. He captures the bishop, knight captures. We have bishop captures on c6, attacking the rook on e8, and now rook 8 to d8. As this was the idea Caruana had while he captured the bishop on h2. Now you can't really capture the rook. If you capture the rook, then rook captures on d6. You lose your, basically the only advantage you had for this sacrifice to the past d pawn, and now you don't really have anything here. You can't, of course, capture the rook, then g1 is coming with checkmate, so this would be very unfavorable. So here, Kramnik tried d7. Rook to e2, we have bishop to captures on g2, and now rook captures on f2, attacking the bishop. Bishop back to c6, and now knight to g4. Here, rook captures on a7 was played, knight to e3, now attacking the rook on d1, and rook to g1. With an attack on the bishop on g5. h6 protecting the bishop, and now rook to c7. You can't really capture the pawn on c2. If you play rook captures on, after this rook to c7, now king to g7 was played. You can't capture this pawn on c2. If you capture it, then you get rook captures on g5, and you can't recapture the rook because rook to c8 simply wins the game. So here, rook captures on d7 would have to be played, but now you don't capture the rook on d7, you first give check, so your rook on c8 will be protected. King moves, and now bishop captures. After rook captures, now you play rook captures on f5 first. And now, of course, if you capture, then first bishop captures with check, and only then you pick up the rook. But after rook c7, rook e5, and with two pass pawns on the queen side, white has good chances here. So after rook c7, of course, not grabbing the pawn. First, Fabi plays king to g7, and now Kramnik starts pushing his own pass pawns, as he does have, well, there are currently 3 connected pass pawns on the queen side, and they may very well connect with the passed d pawn in the future. King to f7, getting the king closer to the d pawn, also unpinning the bishop. Bishop to b5, and here king to e7. a5 is coming, and now rook to f4. c3 by Kramnik, not allowing rook to b4 to attack the bishop, and also now this really solidifies the king's position here, as bishop to f6 and rook to f2 will not be that much of a threat. King to d6, attacking the rook on c7, and here we have rook to b7. This king to d6 wasn't the most precise move by Fabi, and here Kramnik, if he wanted to, maybe he saw it, maybe he didn't, he could have punished it with rook to c6. Now you can't capture the pawn because of rook captures on h6. This opens up a discovered check from the bishop, and after the king moves, simply rook captures the bishop on g5. So you can't really capture it. After rook to c6 check, you'd have to move, but then a6 is coming. Rook captures on d7, and now rook to c8. Attacking the rook on d7, so the rook has to move. Only good square for the rook is actually a7, because you have to prevent the pawn from coming to a7. So rook to a7, and now comes this rook to e8 check, king moves, and you pick up the knight on e3. So maybe he saw this and didn't like it, maybe he didn't see it. I haven't seen the official interview after the game. Maybe some of you have, so do share in the comments. So rook to b7 was played by Kramnik, and now rook to g4, offering an exchange of rooks here. Rook to e1, and now f4. a6, we have h5, a7, and rook to a8. And it seems like it seems like a great position for white. Both pawns are already on a7 and on d7, but you know, you have to play this very precisely. Here Kramnik pushed b4. He's preparing c4 and c5. Fabiano pushes h4. We have c4, h3, c5. This comes with check. King to e5, and here rook to b8 was played. And this position is extremely complicated, and it will definitely take you a lot of time to calculate some ideas. For example, instead of rook b8, it seems like a reasonably good move is c6. I mean, c7 is coming, and then you can choose like which pawn you want to promote to a queen. But again, this c6 move is also very complicated. Here h2. And now after we play c7, now black of course will play rook to g1. He wants to either exchange rooks and then bring a queen into the game, or cover the h1 square. And here it's a very complicated position. Let's say you bring a queen into the game. Then black has this option of capturing the rook, and after you play king to b2, then comes queen to h1. And after you try something, let's say queen to c5 check, simply knight to d5, white has no more checks, no more attacking ideas, and black is simply up too much material and will win this game easily. So on the other hand, after this king to e5 move, after c6 and h2, like we said, c7, rook to g1 blocking. Now the best idea would be bishop to c6, but again, this would only offer a draw. The idea is after rook captures on e1, now you move the king, but now black has this very interesting resource of playing rook to a1 check, sacrificing the rook. King captures, now knight to d5, blocking the bishop's defense of the h1 square. So now bishop captures, king captures, and now let's say we bring a queen into the game. Now Fabi will bring his own queen into the game with check, king moves, and now however you play this out, it will be a repetition and a draw. Even if the bishop comes to help with the attack, you could give a couple of more checks. Even if you go queen a2 check, still the king is very safe on b5. So after this king to e5 move, Kramnik decided to go for rook to b8. He decided to give up his a7 pawn for some activity. So rook captures on a7. We have rook to g8, the threat of course being rook captures on g5 and promoting to a queen. Here bishop to f6, not allowing it, and here d8 queen. So now you have to pick up the queen, of course. Bishop captures, rook captures on g4, and bishop to f6. We have rook to g6, rook to b7 attacking the bishop, bishop moves, and now rook captures on b4. King to a2, and now knight to c2, attacking the rook on e1. Rook to c1, knight to d4, bishop to d3, rook to a4 check, king to b1, and now knight to b3, again attacking the rook on c1 and also the pawn on c5. So rook to e1 check, king moves, and now king to c2, attacking the knight. Knight to d4 check, king b1, and now knight to f3, again attacking the rook on e1. And here rook to d1 was played, and rook to d1 is the decisive mistake that cost Kramnik the game. Here his last hope of maybe maintaining a draw in this game was rook captures on f6. And after knight captures on e1, now bishop to f1, attacking the h3 pawn. After h2, rook to h6, and after king captures on c5, rook captures on h2, and maybe hold this position against the passed f pawn. But after this knight to f3 move, Kramnik played rook to d1, here threatening some discoveries, a lot of them actually, but here it's a completely lost position, and on an off chance you haven't seen this game, feel free to pause the video and find the winning move for Caruana here. It's not extremely complicated, but you know, it's a good exercise for endgame skills. So, for those of you who managed to find the move, congratulations, you are an excellent endgame player. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, here Fabi played rook to a1 check. You have to move, king to c2, only square as the bishop is covering b2, and now rook captures on d1. And this is something Kramnik obviously missed, as you can't capture the rook back. If you play king captures on d1, then h2 is coming, and there is no stopping the passed h-pawn. Rook h6, and now bishop to h4, simply covering up the pawn as the knight protects the bishop on h4. So here Kramnik saw that he just blundered the rook, he can't capture it back. He tried bishop to a6, maybe some bishop to b7 check ideas, picking up the knight and maybe guarding h1. I mean, it's a move, but it doesn't help. Rook to d2 check by Fabi, king to c1, and here we have bishop to b2 check. King b1, and now simply the cold-blooded king captures on c5, not giving white any chances whatsoever, even though he's up a piece. Bishop to b7, now knight to e5. Rook to f4, rook to f6, and now f3, and it was in this position that Vladimir Kramnik resigned the game, as there is really nothing to do here. Here, rook, sorry, it wasn't, I believe, on f3, rook to f5, pinning the knight was played, and here after f2, the game was resigned. But it doesn't matter, you can also play bishop captures on f3, it doesn't help you. Yeah, after knight captures, rook captures on f3, rook d1 check simply decides the game. You capture the bishop, now h2, there's no stopping the pawn. So, I mean, anything was winning here, it's simply too good of a position for black. So yeah, that's the game, a very exciting thriller from round 4 with a lot of turnarounds, and it's I mean, that endgame between Aronian and Karyakin was almost two engines playing, and here we have Fabiano and Kramnik playing an endgame, and it's like one moment this player is winning, one moment that player is winning, and it's hard to imagine this. After all, it was a rest day. So here we have a couple of more photos by Nikki. Here we have, this is them giving an interview after the game with Nastasia Karlovic, and here we have two more photos of Vladimir Kramnik, where you can see how very shattered he is. It's like he's been through a war. Here we have another one. That's a really good one. Here he's totally not impressed with his performance, and how would he be playing a game like that against Aronian in round 3 and then losing a game with white like this in game 4. But yeah, a great game nevertheless, and I believe after 4 rounds Fabiano Caruana takes the lead in this tournament with 3.5 points out of 4, and I didn't prepare the standings for you, but I'll cover the Grishchuk game as well, so I will show you the standings in that game, as that game is really something. So yeah, that's the game. I do hope you enjoyed it. Once again, if you enjoy photography, if you enjoy chess, if you enjoy chess photography, feel free to follow Nikki on all of her social media. I will add all the links in the description below. So thank you all for watching. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here, and I will see you soon with the Grishchuk game. Thank you all.